Okay, so this is the second part in basically both are guilty and both are innocent in the what might have happened with Larry. Okay, so couple things. So as I mentioned before, there's the needing to be liked, which is, we saw that in X Factor. So couple traits that Harry Styles has exhibited is this kind of like, and again, this is just based on limited information because what we see on footage is not really them. But if there's enough footage, you can kind of maybe get some patterns or just some consistencies that seem to be characteristic. But anyway, he appears to have a high agreeableness and approval motivation. So he's kind of consistently demonstrated those traits that are associated with it, at least in his public persona. So if you look at sort of all the numerous interviews during the One Direction era, he was often categorized as accommodating, diplomatic, eager to maintain group harmony. And according to research by Graziano and Tobin, I will be putting this in these references I'm going to mention. I'm going to put them in the description. Individuals that are high in agreeableness tend to prioritize social harmony over personal preferences. So then speaking up at the cost of disharmony is a cost too high to bear. And there's well documented desire to please fans, the reputation as being the charming member. Those traits align with research from Cialdini and Goldstein and their research on approval motivation. And that work suggested that individuals with high approval motivation are more susceptible to influence techniques, particularly when they come from authority figures like record executives or when they appeal to social consensus. This is what successful solo artists do. And then if you think of the protective bubble of One Direction and having Louis and Liam who went to bat for the other boys uh, during many disagreements with management. So if you look at the structure of being in One Direction, it likely created what Van Petegem and his team would describe as a protective environment. So decision making was distributed among five members and their management team, with the responsibility for the group's image not falling solely on any one individual. And then there was research by Williams on group dynamics that suggested that this shared identity it served as a buffer against industry demands. So when One Direction went on hiatus in 2016, Styles, as the youngest, he lost his protective framework, and it could have potentially created what researchers call an identity vacuum, which when you're in your early 20s, like think of all the changes. It's like graduating from high school, then all of a sudden you graduate from college, and then if you're going to grad school or you're going to be in the workforce, I mean, it's kind of a dynamic, it kind of stressful, scary time. So the identity vacuum would happen even if you weren't in a band. But I think the issues that it poses if you were is probably seriously amplified because that's a period of heightened vulnerability to external influence as he went out to set out to establish this solo identity. And then there were some multiple simultaneous transitions around the same time. So Schulenberg's research on life transitions is particularly relevant to what the situation was for him and all of the band members in 2016 to 2017, the band ending, solo careers. So there were multiple major life changes that occurred all at once or concurrently. One was the indefinite hiatus of One Direction, two, the launching of the solo music career, three, branching into acting in the role on Dunkirk, and then significant changes in the life of the bandmate he was closest to from the beginning, which was Louis Tomlinson becoming a father. And then the year before One Direction went on hiatus, they lost Zayn. So wasn't even a year after Zayn left that all of a sudden they were going to go as a whole group on hiatus. So, according to Tanner's research on the quarter life crisis, this convergence of transitions typically occurs during the developmental period of the mid 20s and coincided with him and his establishing of a solo career. And the solo career, in the context of all that was described with these changes, it was like a perfect storm of vulnerability factors. So let's see. So when it came to contractual decision making with the new contract, as they exited the psycho contract, it was a point in the lifespan that was the making of what they call identity reformation. So when Styles signed his solo recording contract with Columbia Records, reportedly an 80 million deal, um, he was likely experiencing what Aquino and Reed would describe as a period of identity reformation. And their research suggests that during such periods, individuals may be more susceptible to accepting terms that don't fully align with their values when presented by authority figures within their industry. So the shift in Styles' public image from the more wholesome One Direction aesthetic to his more provocative solo persona could be understood through Ashford and Humphrey's concept of emotional labor. And their research suggests that performing emotions or personas as part of one's professional obligations can create internal conflict when these performances diverge from one's authentic self. So, as Styles' career trajectory appears to follow the pattern described in Ryan and Desi's self determination theory, he is evolving toward greater autonomy, and his more recent work, particularly The Fine Line and Harry's House albums, show signs of greater artistic autonomy and authentic self expression. And this evolution aligns with Southwick's research on resilience, suggesting that reconnection with core values and establishing new support systems can help individuals recover from periods of vulnerability. And the gradual shift in styles is artistic control, which the contract that they signed after leaving Psycho did have more of that with the advocacy that Louis and Liam had done and laid the groundwork for. So, from his recent solo work to his more recent projects and business ventures like Pleasing, it mirrors the path toward autonomy that these researchers describe as critical for psychological well being and authentic creative self expression. So, that is one explanation that's really academic, but I'm gonna kind of give you my take. So, if you are highly agreeable and you're also see, we didn't include the factor of heartbreak because we did include that, his closest bandmate was having a life transition. Um, that the additional factor is, if he maybe, if he actually um, believed that once the band was over, they could be together, that any thought of that was done, at least in one's mind for a time. And then you're like, I have to navigate this alone. And it's, you spent the last 5, 6 years constantly with 4 other boys to kind of buffer. And, the music industry is not like any other industry. And a, a deal that big would definitely have obligations to it. So $80 million is great, but they also want to make the money back. And the music industry is known for some, as we've talked about, some pretty invasive pressures that they put on stars, kind of like the Nicole Appleton situation, the pressure for her to terminate a pregnancy she wanted. I mean, that's how invasive it is. So, when a beloved artist undergoes a radical transformation, fans often wonder, was this an authentic evolution or the result of industry pressure? So, um, there's a couple of other research that talks about personality, and one coming from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. And it correlates to what we talked about with the high need for approval, a strong need to be liked, are definitely more susceptible to influence. And the vulnerability is particularly pronounced during that transition from group identity to solo. And yes, so um, the high